So good afternoon once again. I was driving down when Chandan asked me if I could do the introduction. So I'm not fully prepared to, I don't have a written introduction to sort of share with you, but let me try and do my best. Firstly, I should let you know that I belong to the family of the Sadvaidyasala, which is going to get presented today, and I happen to also work for the foundation. So about 4 or 5 months back, when Anurag and I were in Dehradun, there was a press article on Sadvaidyasala talking about its 100-year journey. And Anurag asked me, can we get somebody to come and talk to our students and faculty about this journey? And I think when he suggested this, he had 3 things in mind. Number one, that healthcare, like education, should be primarily run keeping the societal interests in mind and not profit alone in mind. So he wanted that to get emphasized, that just like the Azim Premji University's belief that education is a public good and therefore similarly healthcare is one, and if there is an organization that can talk about its story, why not? So that was one that was on his mind. The second that he also was talking about is very few institutions survive more than 100 years, right? Particularly in businesses, there is research that shows that only 7% of the organizations come into the 3rd generation. And if you count institutions that actually survive 200 years, 500 years, and so on and so forth, they are either institutions like the Catholic Church or the Japanese emperors, or educational institutions like Cambridge and Oxford, right? So there must be something about an institution that survives for over 100 years. And I think the key underlying point there was that society rejects institutions which are not of value. So if you have to survive 100 years, there is something in it. So probably that's the second thing that Anurag had in mind. The third and the last thing, which also he said, is we all know about Mr. Premji and his contributions to society. But here is an entrepreneur who started this journey in 1913 with 300 rupees of borrowed money, and a person like you and me who set up an institution. So can this be an inspiration for our young students to go and become social entrepreneurs of the future? So these were the kind of angles that Anurag had in mind when he spoke to me, and I contacted Professor Sreekantan and Dr. Rajesh Srinivasan and asked them if they could come and speak about this, and they graciously agreed. Second is Chandan has been instrumental in pulling this through. I mean, he runs the Colloquium series, but without Chandan's efforts, this would not have been possible. So thank you very much, Chandan, for organizing this. Now coming to the topic and the introduction of the speakers itself. You have read about Dr. Sreekantan in the announcement, so I'm not going to go through that. I'll just pick 2 or 3 highlights. Professor Sreekantan has been an institution builder. Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, which is today considered the very best in the country. He had led the institution from 1975 to 1987 as the director of TIFR. Not only TIFR, but he is also the chairman of Sadvaidyasala. He is the chairman of the Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan Gandhi Center of Human Values. And there have been several illustrations of his contribution to institution building. Second is, he just completed his 90th year, and in his honor, TIFR organized a conference 2 weeks ago. And the latest issue of Frontline has a full story on Dr. Sreekantan's contribution to Indian science. He's been called the living legend of Indian science. Many honors have come to him, including the Homi Bhabha Award, the C.V. Raman Award, and the Padma Bhushan. So that's Professor Sreekantan for you. Dr. Rajesh Srinivasan, he is a PhD in biophysics, decided to live and work in Nanjangud, small town, giving up all the opportunities that come to many of us, he sort of left them aside and has devoted the last 20 years to build this institution. So between Professor Sreekantan and Dr. Rajesh Srinivasan, they will handle this session. Thank you very much.
Friends, it's indeed a great honor for me to come here and talk about a company which has survived for 102 years. The circumstances under which the company was started and how it has survived for this long period is what I'm going to talk about. The company, which is known as Sadvaidyasala Limited, many people know it as the tooth powder company, particularly in Mysore and old Mysore state. This was started by my father 102 years ago. He was exceedingly poor. His name was Venkata. He came from a family of priests who had migrated from a region in Andhra Pradesh called Telangana on the banks of the river Godavari. This particular area, Mulikanadu as it was called, is a place which is known for many other very famous people, one of them being Tyagaraja. In fact, Tyagaraja belonged to the particular region, Mulikanadu in Andhra Pradesh. And second person who hailed from that region, his forefathers, I would say, was Saram Vishweswaraya. He also hailed from, his forefathers hailed from that region. Somehow that region today, on the map you may not even find it because this is nearly more than 150 years ago or so. But my predecessors and forefathers came from that region at the invitation. They were all, as I said, temple priests, experts in recitation of Vedas, basically. The late Maharaja Mummudi Krishnaraja Odayar invited them because one of them had become very famous as for his recitation of Veda mantras, and he had been given the distinction Swaravadhani. So we call ourselves as belonging to the Swaravadhani family. Unfortunately, when Venkata was still in the womb of my grandmother, my grandfather passed away. So my father was a posthumous child, and my grandmother was very poor. She had no property, she had no money, but somehow with her grit and determination, she brought up the child in Mysore city, educated him, and saw to it that he became a graduate in Ayurveda. Mummudi Krishnaraja had started a new Ayurvedic college in the city of Mysore in 1908. And my father happened to be in the very first batch of the students that joined that college. And he passed out in 1913. And then my grandmother suggested that he should start a company for manufacturing Ayurvedic products, essentially to help poor people. You know, during those periods, the allopathic medicine was not available easily because these were the period when everything had to come from outside. There was no manufacture of any of the allopathic drugs in the country. And it would take a very long time for the allopathic drugs to come to India because they had to come only, there were no aeroplanes, so they had to come by sea. And it so happened that was also the period when the Second World War, First World War started basically. That was the period of 1913 to 17. So my grandmother, with some foresight, said that you should start a company for manufacturing Ayurvedic products which will be of use to many people and which will, she herself had some knowledge of medicine, not very systematic knowledge, but she was one of those very adventurous ladies who used to treat patients on the basis of whatever little knowledge she had got. So my father moved to Nanjangud in 1913 because there was some small ancestral property in Nanjangud. And you can see in that photograph my father and mother standing in front of this is the old house in which the factory was started in 1913. The factory had only 5 employees, 5 workers. 5 workers included my grandmother, my mother, my father, and 2 young boys. One of them was, my father was a very good tennis player even at that age, so he used to go to the tennis club in Nanjangud, it's already there. And he picked up one of the tennis club pickers and he came. He was only 12 years old or so. During his college days, my father had also done some apprentice in another Ayurvedic company called Ayogyashram, which was in Mysore, run by Venkatachara Pandit. So he had got some training in Ayurvedic, preparation of Ayurvedic medicines. So one of them, there was one boy by name Chikka who was about 13, 14 years. He had worked there. And when my father moved, he said that I'm also coming with you to Nanjangud. I don't want to work here anymore. I want to go to Nanjangud. So he came. So these 5 people started the company. And the first 2 products my father made were tooth powder and Kasturi Pills. He would see with the 5 workers that I named just now, and this a small limited quantity of tooth powder, limited quantity of Kasturi Pills were made. My father would pack Kasturi Pills in small bottles and put them in a bag, go on a cycle from Nanjangud to Mysore, a distance of 20 kilometers during those days. The roads were so bad. Every alternate day, he would make a trip to Mysore and then give whatever he had made the previous day and distribute it among the various dealers, come back by evening with all these additional medicines that were required, drugs and things like that, for next day's preparation of Kasturi Pills and tooth powder and so on. This, my father, when he started this, he was so poor that he had to borrow 300 rupees from a friend, from a family friend in Hassan. So with that minus 300 as the capital, he started in 1913. Fortunately, the tooth powder that he made and Kasturi Pills were so captured the imagination of the people in Mysore city, etc. The sales went up very fast actually. In fact, he did not expect that suddenly the sales would go up. So he had to expand the factory. And these 5 workers became 20 workers, became 30 workers, and today there must be much larger numbers in working in the factory actually. Now, in 1930s, you see, there was a time when the sale of Nanjangud tooth powder was such that we had to make 30 to 40,000 packets a day. So you can imagine how fast the business built up. I mean, this is really very surprising, but it did happen. But this was helped in a very peculiar way. First of all, I must tell you how exactly hit upon the idea of tooth powder. See, he was an exceedingly religious man. He went to a place where they were doing some puja and this homa, and he saw at the end of it white ash as the homa was being done. Then he investigated further, how is it that this ash is so white? See, normally ash is brown, is slightly bluish in color, but this was absolutely whitish powder. Then he found out This is because of the paddy husk that was used, dry paddy husk that was used for keeping the fire going actually. Then he did some research on that, and then finally he found that if you burn the coffee, if you burn the paddy at a slow rate, a particular this thing, then the result will be white powder. So he started manufacturing. He got the idea that he can make tooth powder out of this ash, and then he started manufacturing the tooth powder in Nanjangud on a very small scale. Then it picked up, and then it went up, and then that became one of our main products over a period of time. And as I just now said, it went up to as much as 30 to 40,000 packets a day. Fortunately, see, he had no experience in business. As I told you, he was just a raw graduate from the Ayurvedic college and who had just started this company with very little capital, with only his own relatives as workers. Fortunately, what happened was, one Mr. Muthuswamy Iyer from Madras, he heard of the success of this tooth powder, came to Nanjangud, and then struck a deal with father that he would become the sole agent for the Nanjangud products in outside the Mysore state. So that was responsible for, he was very ingenious in his methods of advertisement and the way he dealt with business. Actually, you know, nowadays the method of advertising, as you know, with all this TV and is very different from what it was 30, 40 years ago. You depended essentially on mostly newspapers and pamphlets. Actually. So my father also started a printing press to make pamphlets and then labels and things like that. He also, in the meantime, because of the war and lack of proper medicines, he also started manufacturing Ayurvedic medicines. And practically all types of lehas, rasayanas, and tailas he started manufacturing. Within a very short time, all these became quite popular and business became quite attractive for many people. So we had branches in the city of Mysore, in the city of Bangalore, in Mangalore, in Hubli, and so on. By 1940s, there was a very well-structured sales organization which my father organized in all these cities it was going on. He also had other interests. For example, he was exceedingly interested in gardening. Now, he came to know, after 1930s, he started going to various other Ayurvedic factories. And he got a lot of new ideas and then came back and implemented them in his own factory, Sadvaidyasala. He built a house, first an office in 1928. In 1930, he built a house which he named Dhanvantari Villas. And within the next 2 years, he built a whole factory in that new site, and manufacturing of all the products started in the new premises. Now, in fact, even today, the factory is just there, where all the manufacturing takes place, which Rajesh will tell you much more about what kind of products are being done and how, etc. Now, the thing that impressed me most about father during his business thing was the eagerness with which he wanted to develop new products. Let me give you an example. On one of his tours, he came to know that Kanuj in Uttar Pradesh produces certain types of roses which are exceedingly fragrant, which are the ideal ones for the manufacture of Gulkand. You know, Gulkand was one of the products during those days just being done. So he immediately went to Kanuj, brought sufficient cuttings, and then planted them in 3 gardens surrounding Nanjangud. And there was a time when every day we used to get 30 to 40 basketfuls of roses actually. And then he also introduced steam distillation, And with steam distillation, he could extract rose water which was used for eye, and pure distilled water with the roses. And also rose essence. You could take out essential oil from the roses by steam distillation. So all these products were introduced right in the beginning. He also made arkas and asavas and aristas, etc., using steam distillation. He was, I think, for the first time that Ayurvedic products were done this way, because before there were other very odious methods of extracting things out of that drugs, because it was not very easy. So the way he developed this whole business very fast, single-handedly, till 1938, he handled the whole business single-handedly. On the manufacturing side, on the management side, on the production side, everything. And this boy, Muslim boy, the tennis speaker who came, over the years, he picked up how to make all the medicines. He became in charge of the production of all the tailas, all the rasayanas, all the things like that. By just trained by my father, by hand actually, every operation was kind of this. And then he also believed, as he started expanding, he built a lot of houses, lot of construction work was there in Nanjangud and Mysore. And this other boy, Chikka, who had come with him, he became a kind of expert in construction of buildings, on the construction side also, he picked up actually. By 1950s, you see, the business developed very well. And 1938, another very important thing happened. My eldest brother and his first son, he graduated in BSc and in Central College, Bangalore. And then he did Ayurveda, the same college in which my father had done his Ayurveda and got his degree. He came and started associating himself as manager and gave a lot of relief for my father, who had single-handedly operated for 25 years. Actually, all the aspects that I told you, production, management, and advertisement, everything he was handling. But my eldest brother came, Nanjangud, and that was a great relief. When Nanjangud took charge of these operations, he was highly religious. He was also interested in many other things. In fact, he started organizing conferences in Ayurveda. He also gave addresses on Ayurveda. And apart from that, every year we used to perform on Kartika Mola Trayodashi, the Dhanvantari Jayanti, for which we used to get people from various places. And there would be an important lecture by somebody invited from either Mysore or Bangalore on that occasion. So he got himself busy with also a lot of social activities. Actually. He was, as I told you, he was exceedingly religious. So he used to organize Gita Saptahas, and every Saturday, Gita lectures were arranged in our house and also in the Sadvaidyasala building. And somebody would come from Mysore, mostly from the university, and give a nice talk on Gita. And whenever any dignitary came to Mysore, he would be brought to Nanjangud, particularly academic man, and then he would give a lecture. We have a big hall in Dhanvantari Villas, because he built that hall from the point of view of these Dhanvantari Jayanti celebrations. So his way of development was, starting with minus 300 rupees and then gradually. One important thing I must mention here is, I don't remember a single occasion when he borrowed money from anywhere. The only financial adjustment he had was in the bank, the two overdraft arrangement. Otherwise, he did not borrow any money from anywhere else, from anybody else. He managed that. The business picked up and then he would plow back whatever he earned. He did lot of charity. He built, in my mother's name, a Lakshmi Bhajana Mandiram in Nanjangud. He also built, along with the donation from my eldest brother, Ayurveda Vidwan that picture is there, that is on the Mysore-Ooty road. And there, the facilities are there for outpatients as well as inpatients. And the people can go there and stay, and typical Ayurvedic treatment is given, and all the Ayurvedic medicines are available there. And kind of this thing. So in my opinion, this is an example of a man who started with a lot of disadvantages in life, in poverty, and with very little encouragement. You can imagine at a time when conditions in India, you can't imagine what they were. So he succeeded out of sheer effort of his own, and then I think the support from one single individual, that is my grandmother. I must say, hats off to my grandmother, who, in spite of becoming a widow, brought him up and saw to it that he became somebody very respectable in the Mysore state and now Karnataka state. So we are very proud of, I am particularly proud of my grandmother, who had that great courage and everything to do this thing. It's a supreme example where, if you are determined, you can achieve something. Now, the business went on very well, but around 1990s, you see, there was a financial crisis for the company. The financial crisis came because the management, my other brothers, one by one, they all became managing directors. My second eldest brother, Ramaswamy, he finished his industrial chemistry in Banaras. He came and joined the company in 1940, and after he joined, a lot of perfumery products were developed, Madhuri agarbattis and gulab sandesh, some scented sticks, and then Mysore Malik, handkerchief, perfume. So many of those things also were. See, in one sense, though my father was, trained in Ayurveda, he was so liberal-minded in all his approaches that he went in for manufacture of anything that was useful to people. And he followed certain principles which are there at the end. That is, he always wanted things to be absolutely straightforward. No, whether it is income tax business or whether it is pricing of the commodities, whatever it is, he was straightforward in everything. He would kind of not hide anything. That was his character. As I told you, he did not borrow a single pie after the first minus 300 or so. So there are a lot of lessons one can learn. But as I said, 1990, we had financial crisis essentially because the business practices changed. And then a lot of competition came from companies whose goal was just to manufacture something, irrespective of quality or other such thing, make quick money. And see, this kind of business always upsets well-established companies, because you find something, if we are say making something, Chavana Prakash, for example, if you sell it for half the price, people will suddenly buy it, not worrying about the quality. This kind of thing happened. And also business practices changed, methods of advertisement changed, etc. And probably we did not keep track of many of these developments, as a result of which we had a crisis. And I must tell you that after the second generation, after my eldest brother and Ramaswamy and and Venkatesh Murthy, see, we are 8 brothers and 3 sisters. Of course, out of 8 brothers, we are only surviving members, only 3 now. And 5 of them got associated with the Ayurvedic company. There are 3 of us, see, we did not have any direct association with the company in technical way. Another brother, Venkatesh Murthy, he contributed quite a lot, Sudisha's father, to the development of the Ayurvedic products. He qualified himself in Ayurveda, and then he was the managing director for 5 years. And my eldest brother, Ramaswamy, was the managing director. So one by one, they took responsibilities, kept the torch going. And I must also mention about another brother who, by name Balasubramaniam, who took interest in social affairs. He actually did lot of work for the Nanjangud town as a municipal councillor, and he had a lot of connections in politics also. Though he did not get into politics directly, he supported a lot of politicians indirectly actually. He was an engineer by qualification, and he contributed quite a lot to the upgradation and mechanization of many of our projects. In fact, if you go and visit the factory today, you will find that it is one of those few companies, Ayurvedic companies, which are run on exceedingly modern lines in terms of it. Now, as I said, in 1990, when the crisis came, there was a proposal that we had to merge our company with a bigger company. But then, to the credit of the third generation, they came up and they said, no, we will manage it. So they took the challenge and they managed it, turned the corner around, and now we are quite comfortable and we are back on the wheels. So this part of the story, my Dr. Rajesh will tell you. Thank you. If you have any questions, I'll answer after he has. Is that okay?
To all of you. After hearing the initial part of the story, I would be looking at what crisis we face and what actually is happening today in the markets, and what are the kind of challenges we face, keeping in the principle or keeping with the principles of the founder. So just to summarize and then start off, as you know, this was started in 1913, and then in 1990 we had some crisis period, and that was primarily because we had sorry, this is 1 second. Are we on the okay? Yeah. So basically, we had to keep the organization afloat. The fact was that in 1993, what happened was that there was a crisis. There were difficult times. We were talking of merger with another company, talking of a sell-off because we were in troubled times. And the entire crisis was primarily because the manufacture of tooth powder, the markets for tooth powder started dwindling. So there was a downfall because the demand for tooth powder was coming down, and there was a transition into toothpaste markets, which we could not keep with. And at that point in time, we did find it very difficult to market our product and keep the company afloat. Because the one principle that B.V. Pundit followed was, the medicine part was subsidized. It was cross-subsidized with tooth powder, because tooth powder started giving the riches. It started giving the revenue. It gave the turnover. And medicine was more towards service. So that was where, I guess, the economics went a little wrong when the tooth powder market started collapsing. And at that point in time, the family came together, and it was a very, very progressive thought of B.V. Pundit to convert this into a private limited company, which would, then ensure that the entire family was a close knit, and they all were partners in troubled times also, in times of crisis. So around that time, we thought of, ensuring that we'll stick to the principles and continue manufacturing ourselves Ayurvedic medicines, and even if tooth powder comes down, we'll try and keep the markets up with, sales of sales of Ayurvedic medicines. At around which time, we had, this was 1993, and around 1975, the licensing part had started for Ayurvedic medicines. So before that, all the companies that had actually started making licensed Ayurvedic products were far ahead of us in terms of market size. And we were, more concentrating on tooth powder in those years. So, but they were also into compromising of Ayurvedic products, and I'll come to that, when I talk in my slides further. So what actually happened was quality, was one aspect that B.V. Pundit always stuck to, and quality was something that we found very difficult to compromise on. So there is some problem, I think. This is not coordinating with that. So can I speak off this thing? I'm not getting the same slides here. It's not moving there. Yeah. Sorry for the delay. See, resume slideshow. Anyway, as I can continue. So, as I was saying, there was a certain number of principles that B.V. Pundit had, the founder, and it was difficult adhering to all of them. And one of them was the fact that the method in which these Ayurvedic medicines are prepared. So, the previous slide. Previous one. Yeah. So, first of all was the issue of quality. That there are several companies today. Today, if you look at Ayurvedic medicines, we can grossly classify them into two. One is the Shastric preparations and the other is the so-called proprietary preparations. Now, the Shastric preparations, just for your knowledge, are items which are as per the text. So there are these Ayurvedic texts like the Charaka Samhita, the Sushruta Samhita, you have the Vagbhata. These are texts by which, in which there are formulations, and if you make the formulations as per the text, they are all called Shastric. And the proprietary preparations are preparations which are made out of experience, what they call the Anubhava Siddha Aushti. That is something that is made out of combinations from herbs which have properties mentioned in these texts. You can't actually go out of these texts still. There are about 54 texts which have been mentioned in the schedule, and you have to stick to these 54 texts to pick out the ingredients that you want and the properties that they have. So, doing something like a market savvy product was a little bit of a challenge, because if you start altering taste and you start altering the composition and you start altering the delivery system to something that is palatable, something that the public wants, then it's no longer medicine. So we were more into the medicine segment, so to say, the cure segment rather than the care segment. Following the formula to the last ingredients, there are certain formulations you'll be surprised to know which have close to 100 ingredients in them. And each one of these ingredients will have some attribute, some function which is, which it gives the product. It may not be wrong of me to tell you, and you may also be surprised, that there are several companies that don't actually follow the formula to the hilt. And you wouldn't know. Why? Because they all taste similar. It is very difficult for you when you're buying a product to actually feel the taste of all the ingredients that are there. It is just not possible humanly, because you don't know what it is earlier. So there are people who would use one product and label it differently. Okay? There are people who do that. I mean, I'm not necessarily saying all of them do it, but there are people who do that. That's where, following the formula, you don't know what the ingredients are doing. See, Ayurveda, people will say that, and I'll come to that in my next slide, there is a controversy about, how good is Ayurveda? Is it a placebo? I'll come to that in my next slide. So even following the formula that have been mentioned, it's a science which has established over several years. So you have to stick to the formulas that have come out in the text because that is experience-based. You can't shortcut it. You can't, do your own thing and then say that this is working. So we follow the formula to the hilt, and in the Shastric preparations and also the proprietary preparations which, grandfather and his children have made out of their experience. But they are also based on the classical methodologies, which is again very important. Quality control is a concept which is as old as Ayurveda is, because Ayurveda also mentions a particular way of preparation, a particular method of collection of the herbs, how you have to collect it, from where you have to collect it, how you have to process it, what should be the finishing quality, all of it is described there. But there are people who actually don't, follow those methodologies, but we have been following it since inception. And the other thing that, B.V. Pundit was absolutely meticulous about was following the laws of the land. He never compromised on anything which was, put up as a law, be it labor, be it taxes, be it, anything governing the factory. So in 1973, when actually the Ayush department was set up, and we all had to start taking, till then there were no licensing systems for the Ayurveda, Unani, Siddha and homeopathy systems. So actually in 1973 when this was set up, we were the first, in fact the second to go and register. And that's why we have that, 2/73 as our license number. So he was always for following the law of the land. You go to the next slide. Dealing with Ayurveda and principle. This is something that I wanted to talk about. And this was again one of the basic, principles that B.V. Pundit believed in, and also Sri B.V. Nanjangud Swami, who was, the first managing director after B.V. Pundit. The identity crisis. Do we deliver Ayurveda in allopathic terms? Is the question. Do we have to explain or convince people that a system which is 3,000 years old has to actually be brought down to something like a molecule and then say that this is Ayurveda? So this is against the basic principles of Ayurveda and the basic principles on which the entire organization was founded. We believe in Ayurveda, we continue to believe in Ayurveda, and we make Ayurvedic medicines as described in the Ayurvedic text, following methodologies which are in the Ayurvedic text to give you that product. And that is when you can say that Ayurvedic medicines are safe. If you go to molecular route, as is done by several companies today, I would beg to differ that it should not be nomenclatured as Ayurveda, because you're not following the Ayurvedic methodologies there, you're not following the Ayurvedic principles there for preparation. And if you claim that an extract is doing the same job that the actual whole drug did, the entire herb did, it's not right, because you've come down to the actives. The actives have not been tested for 4,000 years. The actives have not been tested for 4,000 years, arguably. People say that it's even 5,000 years old. But even taking the shortest span of time, it is still a huge amount of time, even if it's 1,000 years. The actives have not been tested. The actives are only tested for now 30, 40 years. So you cannot piggyback ride on something which is 4,000 years old and say that a 2-year, 3-year-old research or a 5-year-old research, be it tested 1,000 times clinically, everything. I can give you an example. The US FDA clears drugs after, a very, very stringent clinical trial regime. But if you look at the kind of rejections, they approve it, and after a few years, they have withdrawn the approvals. Why is that? But you use an Ayurvedic drug which was mentioned in these texts, God alone knows how many years ago, you will get the same effect, you will get the same result even today. So it is not entirely unscientific. People call it a placebo, people call it all kinds of things, but I would beg to differ. It is definitely not unscientific. It is a lot of, it is based on a lot of, personal research in terms of the period of time that it has taken to establish. So, person to person, there were different ways. They've probably not broken down and studied the molecules the way we study it today, but definitely it has been established. the effect has been established. I can give you another example. Ashwagandha, I don't know how many of you have heard of this plant. It is called the Indian ginseng. And there are certain attributes to ashwagandha. These attributes were given to it in Ayurveda some, millennia ago. The same attributes are found even today. Researchers over the world over have found them. They have isolated molecules from them and said that yes, this is, it's agreeing with whatever was said earlier. But when they isolate, and I can give you another example for this, you take reserpine, which is an, isolate from, say, sarpagandha. When you take the whole drug, there are no side effects. You take reserpine as an extract, there are side effects. So this is good enough. When you try and look at the reductionist kind of approach, you always end up, in trouble. Dilution is the norm. This is another, issue of following the principles. B.V. Pundit believed that you should be serving the society with medicines. Today, we may be costly, but we may be highly priced, but are we costly is the question. The reason I'm saying this is, dilution is the norm today. If I take, something and dilute it and then price it low, you have to consume more for the same period of time to get the effect. Our Chyawanprash is probably 3 times the price of most of the popular brands that are available in the market, 2.5 times. But the dosage also is 2.5 times less. So this is something, for people who would actually want to take the message across to, the society and convince them, because it's very difficult for me to do it on a customer-to-customer basis. But those who understand, do understand that 6 grams twice daily comes to 12 grams, while 2 to 3 teaspoons, 2 to 3 times a day is a vague description of dose for a medicine. So, and what happened was in this period of crisis that we were dealing with, there were huge number of companies that started drifting from Ayurvedic medicine to FMCG. And all these brands that I've shown there, mind you, are all licensed Ayurvedic proprietary products. So I don't know, I leave the discretion to you people. If these can be allowed to be licensed as Ayurvedic products, then I don't know what is Ayurveda. It certainly does not give us the liberty to call these products as Ayurvedic. But of course, there are people who are sitting at the policy making level and they make policies. These have been licensed and they've been licensed in various states. So now the Ayush department is actually trying to get together and make a more stringent regulation, which is why the good manufacturing practices have come in. But we are still vehemently arguing that the good manufacturing practices have to be separately defined for the Ayush industry, because we cannot meet all the parameters that are there for a chemical drug, because they have different norms there. Okay, go to the next slide. Yeah, so the other thing that B.V. Pundit's very sincerely believed in was being human. Now, when we took over in 1993, we were excessively employed. And the reason for that was tooth powder was a very heavily labor-intensive kind of work. So we were making these packets manually in the factory itself. There was a printing press. The packets would get printed there. These packets were being made there. So it was highly, labor-intensive. And when the markets for tooth powder started dropping, we had a heavy baggage of these workers with us. But despite, being down, we never opted to retrench. Because after all, where would these people go? In those years, probably Sadvaidyasala was the only industry that was there employing so many people. Much later in the years ahead, did we get other factories coming into Nanjangud? Today, Nanjangud is a huge industrial area. You have some of the biggest names there. You have the Maggi plant there, which, is the talk of recent times. And we have Bacardi, which is a rum-making plant, which is further down towards Chamrajnagar. You have Reed and Taylor, which is the best suiting. You have TVS. Some of the big names are there today in Nanjangud. But that time, we were probably, one of those few companies which were there, which were employing. So if we had taken that, taken the stand to retrench these people, where would they have gone? Where would they have sought employment? Because they were only trained to make the kind of medicines that we make. And there was no such industry there. They wouldn't have been able to get employment elsewhere. So it was, something that we decided, and just for the social cause, we said that no, we'll bear with it. And we have actually, in the last, from 1993, we have probably paid up over 1 crore of rupees in just settlements of Provident Fund and ESI, because if these people had been retrenched 20 years, 30 years, or 25 years ago, the liability would have been much, much, much lower. And probably we could have, grown in a different segment. But that was not in our character, and we didn't do it. We are proud to say that even today we have the 3rd and 4th generation of the workers. As their forefathers were working with B.V. Pundit, and the grandchildren are working with us. So we're proud to say that we've also kept those people along with us. We have several people in the market, the distributors, the retailers, who have also come along with us these many generations. So we're quite proud to say that we have never taken the approach other than the humanitarian approach, and that was one of the basic principles that B.V. Pundit followed. Go to the next slide. Unscrupulous competition. Now this was something that we did face in the last 20 years. We are still facing. Just to give you a sense of how things have changed, is there were about 1,000 firms in the 70s. I'm talking of the entire country. Today there are 9,500 firms. And let me tell you, out of this 9,500 firms, there may be hardly 2% of the firms which are really big. Not even 2%, maybe just less than 2%. The remaining 98% of the firms that we have are all small, tiny, and medium-sized industries. Now, when these many industries come into the fray, obviously there is a huge amount of competition. People want to sell. And just to give you a sense of what is the competition between Ayurveda and allopathy, the Ayurvedic industry must be of about, say, between, it's just a guesstimate, it would be about 15,000 crores, while the allopathic industry is close to 70,000 crores. Out of this 15,000 crores, there is 9,500 people to share it. Okay, so that's a huge amount of competition. I don't think there are 9,500 allopathic manufacturing units. They are much lower, but they have a larger share. Now, the other thing is that, when you're under pressure to sell, what do? You normally it leads to corrupt practices. What are the corrupt practices? You either dilute the product, or you try and give some kind of a sop to the person who's prescribing it. So all these practices, I'm sure all of you are prevalent about. All of you are aware about that. It's prevalent. It's prevalent today across all cities, towns, everywhere. The kind of practices that people are today following in selling medicines is very, very pathetic. But again, we for one stuck to our ways of doing things, never indulged in any kind of corrupt practice or any kind of influence to tell somebody that, look, you please take this product because you can make something out of it. We only said, you please take this product because it will benefit the person who's consuming it. So this is one principle that we have stuck to very, very strongly, and we believe in even today. There is hardly a chance that we will ever move to that segment where we go about telling people that you please write our product, or please prescribe our product, or please use our product because you have something else, for doing that. So that is one thing. And there were a huge number of fly-by-night operators who are still in the market. I've just put up the slide only to give you a sense of how anti-obesity drugs work. There are a huge number of them marketing. It is just tall claims and nothing else. It is just tall claims and nothing else, and very little research has gone in to prove that any of these actually work. Now, when I speak about this, I would like to again come back to the fact that I was talking about pure Ayurveda versus, the kind of mix that you get out of extracts and this and that. The safety tag for Ayurveda comes because it is like consuming vegetables. We all eat vegetables every day. So it has to be prepared in that manner. It has to be extracted in that manner. It is like, making your home dish. And if you do it that way, it's safe. When you bring it down and you start making tall claims, you don't know what is happening. I mean, it can just go haywire. So if people are saying that you apply some kind of an oil on your belly and it will contract, and they do a 2 crore market in 1 year, it is mind-boggling. They have done it. I mean, there are companies, I don't want to name the brands, but there are brands which are selling oil which is applied on the belly and you will shrink, maybe 2 inches. So these kinds of, tall claims are supposed to be governed by an act called the Magic Remedies Act, but again, the Ayush department is supposed to take note of it and, actually charge these people with the wrongdoing. I don't know how much is happening because you see all these advertisements everywhere, in newspapers, on TV channels. You have, weight gain, you have weight loss, you have all kinds of tall claims being made. But believe me, there is a Magic Remedies Act and you can only advertise for general health, you can advertise for colds, coughs, and that's about it. So you actually can't advertise for anything else. But today the media is filled with advertisements, including, growing tall. So there are advertisements for growing tall, there are advertisements for all kinds of things. So we never, actually law-fearing. We were basically law-fearing, we never wanted to break the law. Even today, there are a few products that we have in our thing which are so-called OTC, over the counter. But we still fear that if we advertise it, it will be wrong. So we are not into, doing any kind of massive, large-scale advertisement. So is profit a dirty word in the healthcare industry? That is the question. And I would say that not profit, but the way it is earned. So if you're doing something wrong, you're communicating something wrong, you're actually, telling the person or you're fooling the person that this is the benefit that you will get. And in the long run, if that doesn't happen, there are so many people, so many companies who have actually tried to export a lot of medicine and brought down the name for Ayurveda as a science. Because there are certain drugs, especially aphrodisiac category, which have to use certain metals. Now, if these are not in the right proportion or not correctly prepared, they can lead to metal toxicity. But they are they are not prescribed drugs, they are OTC drugs. So people advertise and, then the mass starts consuming it for long durations and end up with a kidney problem or a liver problem or a spleen problem, which is and who gets the bad name? It's Ayurveda. So that's why I say that any industry has to make profit. But our principle and our ethics have told us that do it the right way. Don't go about, selling a product in a wrong way. Go to the next slide. Healthcare, a public good. This is something that Sudesh spoke about in the beginning. This is another sad state of affairs, and I don't think I'm exaggerating, but I am happy to also say that there are a few things changing. There are a huge number of colleges that produce Ayurvedic graduates, but the sad part is most of these Ayurvedic graduates intern in allopathic hospitals because of the lack of infrastructure, and then tend to practice the wrong science. If Ayurveda can be used correctly, it is a huge science which can bring in cures at home. There are a huge number of home remedies. So for minor ailments, you don't actually need to go to a hospital. And today, for a minor ailment, you go to a hospital. I'm sure all of you have had some experience or the other, that you end up with a huge bill. So there are a huge number of things that can be done. And I think, those of you who are in the social healthcare arena should think of ways in convincing people to actually look for this Ayurvedic medium or an alternative science as a medium to cure themselves rather than look at this thing. We have, again, something that was instituted by B.V. Pundit and his eldest son, B.V. Nanjun. And today, most of the family members are part of the trust, is the Dhanvantari Arogyashram Trust. And even today, we are actually consulting there at 20 rupees. Believe me, people come and laugh at us. They say, your consulting fee is, way, way below par. But we want to stick to the ethics that we believe in, and we have kept it at 20 rupees today. It was free for a long number of years. It was 10 rupees for a long number of years. We've made it 20 only so that people give us the value and not for, and we also have there what we call a poor patient fund. There, and we, treat poor patients from the vicinity, and their treatment is completely free. Now, yeah. Okay, are we short of time? Okay, sure. Can I quickly run through, I just have one more slide to finish. So giving back to society, this is something that my uncle also spoke about, and that is, again ingrained in whatever was the ethics or the principles of B.V. Pundit. Continuous employment opportunity for the locals for over 100 years. And again, we are proud to say that we don't have any outsiders in our factory. We have had problems with them, but we have not really employed anybody from outside Nanjangud. Nanjangud and the surrounding towns. Entire employment comes from there. We have free health camp for the genuine poor at Dhanvantari Arogyashram. And of course, B.V. Pundit has done a huge number of social, functions and like music concerts, lectures, and spiritual congregations, all of which my uncle has briefed you about. So I think, yeah, that's it. You just go to the next slide. Yeah. This is the last slide that I have, the social message. And he used to always believe in this. Dharmo rakshati rakshataha. Dharma protects those who protect it, is the essence of it. I'm sure at the university, you people study this more intricately and try and bring out the meaning. But this is the fact, and in my opinion, it's certainly one of the most essential facets for anybody who is aspiring to be a healthcare entrepreneur. Thank you, and welcome to take any questions in this line.
Have you planned any?
Sorry? Yeah.
Planned any museum?
We have, yes, Dhanvantari Arogyashram, museum for what?
That is the way.
No, the evolution of Ayurveda, sorry, we don't have for that, but we did have. We have a book which is released during our centenary. Yeah, we will. Thank you.
Can we visit your purple garden and get
Most welcome, sir. Most welcome.
we get plants?
You will get to understand the plants that are having medicinal properties. We don't have a nursery as of now.
But we soon hope to start one. And yes, anybody is welcome anytime to come and look at our setup, the factory as well as the garden. You're most welcome.
Yes, or pharmaceutical people. If it is said that it's not because of Ayurveda laws, because of the drugs which they manufacturing and exporting. So I think the Ayurveda is pushed to a corner by allopathic medicine, the mainstream medicines. So what is your suggestion about how to popularize Ayurveda more so that this Ayurvedic production and system of Ayurveda gets?
Yeah, I mean, this is the question which is being answered at the central level itself. The Department of Ayush now, Ministry of Ayush will be set up under Narendra Modi. Yeah. So what is to be done? I would say that if we go the allopathic route with Ayurveda, we are getting lost. That is my belief, that's my personal belief and opinion. If you go the Ayurvedic way for the medicines, you have the categories of medicines for certain products. Those have to be studied, understood, and produced to the world based on Ayurvedic principles, not explained in allopathic terms. The minute you do that, there are other people who are far better than us in extraction and bringing down the molecule, bringing it down to
completely. Germany also has it, because they are in any case inclined towards Sanskrit, so we also have it. So very soon they will be teaching us these sciences that we will be left out. So definitely we should look at, communicating to the masses that come back to the roots, come back to our system. And for sure I can tell you, for common ailments, we can definitely, give good answers. For chronic ailments, we can give good answers. A very good way ahead is to integrate, and integrate at what level? Integrate at a level where absolute intervention of, say like surgery. There are in Pune there are institutes which are doing surgery also, the Ayurvedic way. But where there is absolute necessity for allopathic intervention, yes, that should be taken. There you can support with Ayurveda, that should be taken up. So an integrated approach is also something that a lot of people are talking about. And I'm sure in the near future we will see a lot of these.
Question that comes to my mind right away. Do you think Ayurveda, is it really compatible with the kind of modernity that we are experiencing?
In what sense? In
Because
those forms, in what sense do you want to
because see, somewhere in the course of your talk, you also, I think a couple of times you stated that what B.V.Pundit, the company is doing is scientific. Now the thing is, the very notion of science and being scientific, it itself is the way we envision science. It itself has certain connotations.
Right.
And do you think, as far as my understanding goes, Ayurveda is not based on those kind of scientific principles?
It is not, but it can be established, what I'm saying.
So the thing is, isn't there a danger that, when you're
Not really. If I'm, just permit me to answer. If I take a pill, okay, like a salbutamol or a paracetamol, I know that this is one molecule and I know I can study it completely. So I can establish the scientific basis of that also. Or if you're talking of an antibiotic, then I've done several experiments to see whether, in culture, this particular molecule is working against that particular bacteria. It may not be able to establish Ayurveda in those terms, but certainly a lot of studies are being done, and let me tell you that there are certain combinations of drugs. And today, even the modern, so-called modern medicine people give you a prescription of 5 to 6 drugs. Nobody stops at one. So they are also going into multi-drug therapy. What are they doing? They are giving you one single drug for each of those conditions. But here it may be a mix. The only thing that needs to be done is it needs to be established in the form that it has been for these many years, which is where the modernity needs to come in. You need to, like a Yogaraj Gugulu or a Trayodashanga Gugulu or something in that, or a Dashmula Rishtam or a Chavanprash, needs to be taken as a Chavanprash, but needs to be studied also as that. If I start breaking it down, it is no longer the same science that we are talking about. Yeah. If I start breaking it down, it's no longer that science.
The allopathic science or any modern science evolves, right? Something direct to the body of knowledge. Now, when you keep talking of 5,000 years, 6,000 years, isn't there a need to be knowledge to direct to the body of science? Can you just
Yes, but I agree with you absolutely. I cannot, it has developed. It's not that it's not developed because the human body has also changed. And the fact still remains that whatever was described 2,000, 3,000, 5,000 years ago still holds good.
But cannot something add to that? You cannot say that.
Yes, you can add, but then you need that much more time to piggyback right on that safety tag and say that this is absolutely safe. And I would say more in principle or in line with the Varatakta Kava philosophy. You can't explain it in modern terms is all I'm saying. When you evolve, there could be a combination that could come up because the diseases are not the same that used to be there so many years ago. So you could evolve an Ayurvedic drug for like, for example, Delhi today, chikungunya, was not there as a disease or has not been described as a disease those many years ago. prescribe a drug and it will work. So they are actually now, there is a huge project being developed by the government of India where they are trying to correlate the genetics of the human body, the DNA, with Vata Pitta Kapha. Vata Pitta Kapha, three basic humors, body humors.
Can you write questions together and then you can answer them all at once? You have to really find them.
Just one follow-up question on the what I get asked. Another practice which Ayurveda has itself, the PhD, human practice. You can't do it in the practice. Just principle of the allopathy, what we so-called modern. And another terms, the so-called branding of the Ayurveda itself, the infrastructure products. Is it the conservative which are doing the same thing?
Is it the?
I mean the two view.
No, actually, that's where we want to differ. That is where we want the entire licensing system to be different. See, I'm not denying that there has to be progress. But if you are progressing and supposing you come up with something which is really dangerous for the system, and you're piggyback riding on this Ayurvedic tag, saying that no, it's from 4,000 year old science, it's Ayurveda, it's absolutely safe, and you have also given that license, Ayurvedic medicine, then what do you do? And then the entire science is questioned. Because of a few people doing it wrongly, the entire science is questioned. So you have lost that entire credibility that you built up for these many thousand years just because somebody has been given that tag of calling it an Ayurvedic product, and that is utilized in a wrong way, and it ends up in a wrong, result. So nutraceuticals should be labeled as nutraceuticals. Herbal products which are on research or research-based herbal products should be called that. You can give it any other name, but don't call it Ayurvedic until and unless it is sticking or following, manufactured following the principles of Ayurveda. This is all that I would, opine.
Have you made a study of both generation users of the product?
Not a study as such, but we have a lot of feedback. Okay. Which is excellent. I mean, there is definitely no doubt that today we stand, and I am standing here and talking to all of you only thanks to all, dedicated customers like Mr. Jayakumar. So like Mr. Jayakumar will be using our products for these many years. And it's only that. So we can advertise, it's not really, gone the wrong way, but we still have that dedicated time. So I would like to thank the Azim Premji University for giving us this opportunity and sharing our 100 years experience with you. Thank you very much. Thank you for getting this whole thing together. Yeah. That's okay. I mean, it's our pleasure.
So, a small box of shooting ginger Sadvaidyasala has been known for decades. Just for everyone